In a shock that has sent ripples through the corridors of Forrester Creations and beyond, Finn finally unraveled the truth behind Liam's supposed inoperable tumor. What had been touted as a sinister growth threatening the very foundation of Liam's life turned out to be nothing more than a superficial scar. Finn's careful examination revealed that Grace, under the guise of a dedicated medical professional, had never once laid a scalpel upon the alleged mass, meaning no invasive procedure had ever been conducted and no malignant cells excised. The implications of this discovery reverberated immediately through Logan Tower. Liam had been suffering under the false pretense of a deadly condition, his every moment haunted by pain that could have been diagnosed, treated, or at the very least fully understood. Bill, upon learning that he had unwittingly financed this deceit, pouring millions into Grace's clinic under the promise of pioneering, life-saving surgeries, felt the fury and betrayal coil in his chest. The realization that his hard-earned money had funded a fraud led him and Liam to file a joint lawsuit against the clinic, their claim laying bare a tapestry of lies so intricate that even seasoned legal minds found themselves taken aback. Yet as they dug deeper into the financial records subpoenaed for discovery, they unearthed an even darker layer. The funds had not simply been pocketed by Grace or her associates, but had mysteriously vanished into a labyrinthine offshore account, brandishing the ominous label, Project Perseus. No public records existed to trace this moniker, and every intermediary shell company they followed dissolved into smoke, leaving only the question of who, or what organization, was orchestrating this operation from the shadows. As Bill and Liam labored to connect the dots, private investigators uncovered tantalizing hints, references to ancient mythological code names, encrypted communications pointing to high-ranking corporate players, and whispers of clandestine research that extended far beyond the scope of Forrester's stylistic empire. Each revelation compounded the urgency of the lawsuit, as Liam's legal team argued not only for restitution of the millions misappropriated, but also for punitive damages against those who had conspired to weaponize a man's life for profit and power. Amid the courtroom battles and boardroom intrigues, Liam remained ensnared by a reality far more impervious to legal remedies. His body was betraying him again, this time with a tumor that truly existed and grew larger by the day. Grace, faced with the collapse of her carefully constructed lies, had retreated into a defense strategy that left Liam to endure pain so acute that even the most stalwart of souls would buckle. She rationed his painkillers as if they were precious commodities on the brink of expiration, doling out pills in drips and drabs designed to mask just enough agony to keep Liam conscious, but never enough to grant respite. Once the prescription ran dry, Liam felt each nerve flare in blinding bursts, as though shards of glass were being pressed into his flesh, a reminder that without Grace's contrived assurances, he would have to confront the agonizing truth. The tumor was real, malignant, and unstoppable without proper medical intervention. With his world spinning between the sterile glare of court transcripts and the raw, merciless throbbing in his bones, Liam teetered on the precipice of despair. His nights became a torment of fevered dreams and waking nightmares, each pulse of pain echoing with the specter of mortality. Yet, even as the horizon of his life dimmed, he clung to the support of Bill and Finn, allies unified by a shared sense of betrayal and the resolve to expose Project Perseus before it claimed another victim. Above them all loomed the unanswered questions. Who had orchestrated this conspiracy? What was the true purpose behind the elusive Perseus? And with Liam's fading strength, could justice, legal and medical, arrive in time to stave off the final, irreversible blow? The stage is set for a confrontation that will pit family against shadowy cabals, love against betrayal, and life against the encroaching void, because in Los Angeles, where glamour and deceit walk hand in hand, even hope can be weaponized, and the line between salvation and destruction proves thinner than a surgical scar. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Nick Marone guided his restored speedboat out of the Naples harbor, his eyes glinting with determination as he glanced over at Brooke Logan, whose sea salt-kissed hair caught the first pink rays of dawn. He had planned this morning to be nothing less than the most romantic gesture of his life, a prelude to the question he was poised to ask, "Will you marry me?" He imagined the look on Brooke's face, the tremor in her voice as she said yes, the future he and she would build together, one of stability, authenticity, and the kind of unwavering support she deserved. He told her that Ridge Forrester represented a past she could no longer afford to revisit, that in Nick's arms she would finally find the home she'd sought for so many years. Yet as the engine's roar filled the salt-tinged air, there was a hitch in the plan he'd failed to mention. The boat was not as seaworthy as he'd claimed. Only days earlier he had wrested the vessel back from a lengthy repair shop stay, confident that his pockets and his lineage, tinted by Forrester money, could ensure perfection. In reality, the hull had sprung a hairline crack, the steering was touchy, and the radio meant to alert the Coast Guard in an emergency emitted only static. Nick convinced himself these were trifles, minor glitches that love would overcome. But love could not smooth over metal fatigue, nor could it compensate when a woman's life was at risk. As they cleared the breakwater, the sea opened into a vast expanse of sapphire, and for a moment, Brooke's laughter rose like music on the breeze. She leaned against the rail, her fingertips grazing the rippling surface, memories of past tumultuous days with Ridge flickering in her mind, the fiery passion, the painful betrayals, the relentless tug of destiny that bound them. Hope Logan's warning voice echoed in her conscience. Be true to yourself, Brooke, not to anyone's expectations. She had survived Ridge's schemes, Liam Spencer's manipulations, even the very real danger of that last fateful accident. Now, afloat on Nick's promise, she felt free until the faint crack of metal jolted her from reverie. She turned to Nick, who was bent over the engine housing, his brow furrowed. He flashed a confident grin and waved her back to the bow, but her unease had taken root. She watched him steer a tight circle, the boat tilting sharply as the morning wind deepened. Then, just as Ridge's voice crackled over Brooke's phone, he was calling from the dock, his tone frantic. Nick slammed the throttle forward in a show of bravado. The boat lurched, the stern rose, and Brooke, caught unawares, slipped on the slick deck. With a loud, sickening crack of wood and a heart-stopping gasp, she tumbled backward into the churning water, her scream swallowed by a monumental splash that reverberated across the bay. On the shore, Ridge emerged from the crowd at the marina, eyes widening at the distant tremor on the water. He dropped the phone, sprinting toward the edge of the dock with every ounce of memory of holding Brooke's hand in storms both literal and figurative, propelling him forward. Nick, eyes wide with horror, skidded the boat to a halt and leaped after her, but the engine cut out, leaving only silence and a bobbing silhouette. Brooke fought the panic as salt water stung her lungs, her arms thrashing until she broke the surface, gasping in a sweet, agonizing rush of air. Ridge, who had vaulted onto a waiting tender, roared across the wake, his anger eclipsed only by relief when he hauled her aboard. Her drenched frame collapsed into his arms, and for a breathless moment, time froze. Two lovers reunited by catastrophe, history rushing back in a torrent of regret and residual longing. Nick's anguished cry drifted across the water, but Brooke's heart pounded not with fear, but with clarity. She was no one's trophy, no captive of past loyalties. Though Ridge cradled her like a wounded dove, and Nick knelt at the rail, eyes glistening with apology and unspoken affection, Brooke felt a distant detachment from both men's quests for her devotion. She was the epicenter of a love triangle warped by power and entitlement, and in the eye of her own inner storm, she resolved to claim her autonomy. Meanwhile, halfway across the world back in Los Angeles, in the cavernous halls of the Spencer estate, Hope Logan tended to Liam Spencer with a tenderness he thought he'd never feel again. The long hours in the hospital had been spent slipping in and out of consciousness, his mind echoing with ghostly fragments of his past with Hope, the stolen kisses, the shared dreams, the heartbreaking rupture that drove them apart. Now, safe on the plush sofa of his childhood home, hooked to monitors and infused with the promise of recovery, Liam felt those recollections surge back like tidal waves. Hope hovered at his side, her care warm and steady, but her eyes betrayed a swirl of complex emotions, relief that he would live, sorrow for what had been lost, and a trembling spark of what might still be. As she brushed a strand of hair from his brow, Liam squeezed her hand, the simple contact igniting memories of love that once had been destiny. For a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist, and they floated in a bubble of remembrance, of secrets whispered beneath the moon, of laughter echoing in empty rooms, of an innocence stolen by pride and miscommunication. But with the realization that Liam would survive came the cruel question, had time healed wounds or merely buried them? Would the intensity of old passions prove too enticing, undermining the stable life Liam and Hope had built apart? Or could this shared brush with death rekindle a bond more profound than either dared to hope? Across town at Los Angeles Memorial Hospital, John Finn Finnegan's white coat billowed down the corridor as he rushed to Grace Buckingham's office, his mind a cacophony of unanswered questions. He laid out his case with forensic precision. The miraculous disappearance of Liam's brain tumor, despite a hairline incision, the erased medical records, the shadowy directive that had forced Grace's hand. Grace, normally the epitome of composure, sat rigid behind her mahogany desk, her sapphire eyes flickering with guilt. She had believed that Bill Spencer's generous payment for a miracle cure absolved her of protocol, that the urgency of saving a man she cared for justified clandestine measures. She had manipulated pathology reports, coerced lab technicians, even risked her license to fabricate scans. But Finn, whose integrity was ironclad, refused to let her bury the truth. As his voice rose, citing every breach of ethics and trust, Grace's defenses crumbled. In that moment, her professional facade shattered, and she confessed to a conspiracy deeper and darker than mere medical malpractice. Threats against her sisters, Paris and Zoe, had coerced her into compliance. A nameless figure had dangled their safety in exchange for her silence. Finn recoiled at the revelation, torn between his duty as a healer and his compassion as a friend. He realized that exposing Grace would not only upend the reputation of Los Angeles Memorial, but also endanger the women she loved. Yet his oath bound him to truth, pushing him toward a confrontation he could not escape. As the echoes of Grace's confession reverberated through the marble halls, Finn squared his shoulders, steeling himself for the fallout. Grace's tears fell onto her impeccably pressed blouse as she whispered apologies, but Finn knew there would be no easy pardon. This was more than a breach of medical ethics. It was a betrayal of every patient who entrusted their life to her hands. He promised her only that he would do what was right, regardless of the collateral damage. Grace, trapped by her own deceit, watched Finn depart, her hope dissolving into dread. She would soon face exposés, board investigations, and the wrath of Bill Spencer himself, who would demand accountability for his million-dollar miracle. So as the Italian sun set on Brooke's turbulent odyssey of self-discovery and the L.A. skyline prepared to bear witness to Finn's moral crucible, viewers brace for an episode where every relationship is tested and every character's true motives come under scrutiny. Memories from Hope and Liam will resurface, threatening to rewrite the script of their futures. Brooke's dramatic plunge will reignite the war for her heart and autonomy, and Grace's panicked admissions will plunge Los Angeles Memorial into scandal. Love, loyalty, and power collide in a symphony of betrayal and redemption, proving once again that in the world of the bold and the beautiful, the only certainty is that nothing is certain, and every choice carries a price. Tune in Tuesday, August 5th, for a whirlwind of revelations that will leave you breathless and demanding more.